All right, we're going to go ahead and talk about Hades. Hades, who is uh, considered the oldest son of Cronus and Rhea. Hades was the designated ruler of the underworld, while his brother Zeus received the realm of the sky, and his other brother Poseidon was allocated the realm of the sea. But who was or who is Hades? What were his origins, and how did he rule the realm of the underworld? This god, often known as the Unseen One, has often baffled scholars, with many roads leading into almost impenetrable pasts. Fear of even saying his name led many to call him the wealthy one, since he oversaw the rich resources of the earth. And of course, obviously, that led to the word Pluton, which eventually evolved into the name Pluto. So Hades is indeed a very curious god. Now, Hades was both an Olympian and a chthonic god, but obviously not a Titan. Early on, the Iliad describes Hades as the god that is most hateful toward mortals. In the realm of the underworld, Hades ruled over the dead and is assisted by many divine helpers, including Hypnos and Thanatos and the ferryman Charon. As a god of the underworld, Hades also oversaw all the mineral wealth, and so is often called, as I said before, the rich one. With this said, the playwright Sophocles says he also possessed a wealth of something else, that being sorrow, declaring, "The gloomy Hades enriches himself with our sighs and our tears." Hades is often viewed as sitting on an ebony throne, holding a scepter, and wearing a helmet given to him by the Cyclops, which could make him invisible if he so willed it. According to Pindar, with this staff, Hades drove the shades into the lower world. Hades typically was carried about in a golden chariot drawn by four black immortal horses. Hades also possessed many oxen in the lower world. So I heard. As well as upon the island of Erythea, attended by Menoetius. Of course, Poseidon is also associated with abducting Demeter's daughter, Persephone. So it's not just Hades that gets the connection to that. So I just want to bring that up too. But it must be noted that the origins for Hades' name happens to be uncertain. But during the age of classical Greece, he was called Adion. And later on, the iota in Greek became silent. His name may derive from Adion, whence it would signify the god who makes invisible. Although some believe, as opposed to him making things invisible, that he is the one who is invisible and so becomes the invisible one. Others believe his name derives from Hado or Cado, with the name Hades then meaning the all embracer or the all receiver, in connection with the fact that ultimately, well, Hades receives all mortals into the underworld. In his Cratylus, Plato has Socrates state concerning the true origins for the name Hades. So Socrates is depicted given the definition of what it means, while ridiculing people's fears of him and their use of the name Pluto instead. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of read through this. It's very interesting from my perspective. Uh, so Plato says as follows: Pluto gives wealth, or Plutos, and his name means the giver of wealth, which comes out of the earth beneath. People in general appear to imagine that the term Hades is connected with the invisible, and so they are led by their fears to call the god Pluto instead. Unquote. But Plato has Socrates argue that his name Hades does not mean the invisible or unseen, but derives from Adonai. This is important, meaning knowledge. And so he is the one who has the knowledge of all noble things. He's the one, well, he does know the mysteries of the veil, what's on the other side when it comes to death, does he not? Plato states as follows. He says, in spite of the mistakes which are made about the power of this deity and the foolish fears which people have of him, such as the fear of always being with him after death, and of the soul denuded of the body going to him, my belief, says Plato, is that all is quite consistent, and that the office and the name of the god really correspond. Even the sirens, like all the rest of the world, have been laid under his spells. Such a charm, as I imagine, is a god able to infuse into his words. And according to this view, he is perfect, and he is the accomplished sophist and the great benefactor of the inhabitants of the other world. And even to us, he says, who are upon earth, he sends from below exceeding blessings. He's giving blessings. So where Plato sees him as connected to knowledge, as connected to giving blessings. He continues, for he has much more than he wants down there. Wherefore he is called Pluto, or the rich. Not also, he says, that he will have nothing to do with men while they are in the body, but only when the soul is liberated from the desires and evils of the body. Now, there is a great deal of philosophy and reflection in that, for in their liberated state, he can bind them with the desire for virtue. But while they are flustered and maddened by the body, not even Cronus himself would suffice to keep them with him in his own far-famed chains. The legislator called him Hades, not from the seeing, far otherwise, but from his knowledge of all the noble things. So we get from Plato that Hades is a noble god. Hades is a perceptive god. Hades is a deity that ultimately connects to wealth and to the power of the earth itself moving forth. Is that interesting? It's a kind of a positive spin on Hades that we don't oftentimes hear, and this very much goes into Hades' perspectives of the gods. However, because of the fear of his name, the Greeks began, as I said, to call him Plouton, with the root meaning wealthy, and proceeded from there to the Roman form of his name, Pluto. So the Greeks call him Hades, while the Romans call him Pluto. Now, the name Plutos in relation to any deity is found first in Hesiod in his Theogony. This was written between 730 to 700 BCE, or I should say composed, and was said to have Pluton was said to have Demeter as his mother and Ision as his father. Obviously, this is the derivation of the name Pluto. Hesiod writes, find Plutus, who goes upon the whole earth and the broad back of the sea, and whoever meets him comes into his hands. That man he makes rich, and he bestows much wealth upon him. So this, of course, is not the Hades that we know, but this is the idea of Pluto, which will combine with the Hades element pretty soon. According to the Odyssey, Demeter copulated with Ision in a fallow field that had been plowed 3 times, no doubt, connected to sympathetic sexual magic to secure the bounty of the earth. So you do have this deity, this Plouton, that is connected to the wealth of the earth. That we do find this in Greek sources, and eventually this name and parts of this aspect of the personality will combine with the Hades. Now, the name Pluto is referenced often in the Elysian Mysteries, and this is where one of the places where Plouton or Pluto becomes as one with Hades, especially, by the way, in reference to Persephone. But by the way, interesting little point. Earlier on in the Eleusinian Mysteries, the mysteries were connected to Plutos, and then went to Pluto, and then later on it was understood as Hades. So you do have, again, an interesting development. As Plutos, he is often the god holding the horn of plenty, cornucopia. Let's go to the first image. He's often the god holding the horn of plenty in various bas reliefs. He is depicted as a boy held in the arms of the goddess, representing Erene, or prosperity. So in this sense, he is the gift of peace. He is also depicted in the arms of Tyche, which was the fortune of cities. So we see that here too as well, right? Let's go to the next image. According to Aristophanes, because of his great wealth, to bestow wealth on whoever he desires, Zeus blinded him so he would disperse these gifts without playing any favoritism. Zeus also makes him lame. His sight is eventually restored. He is better able then to receive the gifts. But Lucian of Samosata in the 2nd century directly relates Plutos and Pluto together as one in a satirical dialogue known as Timon, the story related to a parchment that was directed by Hermes. And let's go to the next image. And says as follows: "It is not Zeus who sends me, but Pluto, who has his own ways of conferring wealth and making presents. Pluto and Plutus are not unconnected, you see," he says. "When I am to flit from one house to another, they lay me on a parchment, seal me up carefully, make a parcel of me, and take me around," referring to this will. "The dead man lies in some dark corner, shrouded with the knees upward in an old sheet, with the cats fighting for possession of him, while those who have expectations wait for me in the public place, gaping as wide as young swallows that scream for their mother's return." Wow. Okay. So we're seeing the merging of these two ideas here. Let's go to the next image. We see also Athensychus states that the resemblance of the name of Plutos to Plouton cannot be accidental. Plouton is Lord of the dead, but as Persephone's husband, he has serious claims to the power of fertility. Eventually, Plutus, the son of Demeter, becomes her son-in-law through Persephone. So you see, so this right here is a great image of Persephone, as you can see. Let's go to the next image. Hades was sometimes referred to as Zeus Chthonius. He's also known as which is interesting. In his Works and Days, Hesiod calls this underworld deity who connects with Demeter specifically the Zeus of the earth, Zeus Chthonius, which indicates connections to the sky father of that name. And so, which I find is fascinating, he states as follows. He says, pray to Zeus of the earth and to pure Demeter to make Demeter's holy ground sound and heavy. When first you begin plowing, when you hold in your hand the end of the plow tail and bring down your stick on the backs of the oxen as they draw on the pull bar by the yoke straps, unquote. Here it is Zeus of the earth who is directly connected to Persephone, establishing her as his consort. But as noted by Marie Langdon, he is not quite of the underworld, but connected to the soil itself and agriculture. And so still is associated with Zeus of the sky, perhaps. However, John Michaelos states that Zeus Chthonius is understood as the underworld aspect of Zeus, often identified with Hades himself. In this case, it is Zeus Chthonius working side by side rather than Persephone, revealing an older stratum of association going back to the god-goddess designation. So you have Zeus Chthonius working side by side with Demeter, this, by the way, is a representation of Pluto in connection, actually Helios Pluto, which we'll go and talk about in just a few minutes. But for right now, we'll just go ahead and put this picture down. You get the idea. So the underworld aspects, you see the snakes there, right? So Hades was sometimes then referred to as Zeus Chthonius. He is also referred to as Zeus Catachthonius, which means Zeus of the underworld. Other deities to whom the title Catachthonius was connected to, of course, was Demeter and Persephone, and to the Furies. One of the most curious designations of Hades, Pluto, is when he is understood as Pluto Helios. They discovered a dedicatory inscription from the city of Smyrna, which is present-day Izmir. That describes a 1st or 2nd century sanctuary that's dedicated to, quote unquote, God himself as the most exalted of a group of 6 deities. So there's God himself, and then there's 6 deities that are included, which, by the way, these are clothed statues that states, and it mentions a Plouton, Helios, and a Cor Selene. So here you have the Pluto, the sun, or Cor, the moon. I find this really interesting. So you have this idea that this Pluto is connected to the sun, while Cor is the moon. And of course, Cor is connected to Persephone. The other deities, if you're curious, are Helios Apollo, who is paired with Artemis in connection with the moon. And then, of course, you also have Min. Min is an Anatolian moon deity, sometimes identified with Attis, and which had a ceremonial table that's described as being in front of him. And these are all subordinated under that which is designated as God himself. So you have this idea. But what I find is interesting is that these Plato and this Pluto and this Cor, they're understood or described as a divine couple. And the text describes a linen embroidered bridal curtain. So in fact, the two are placed as bride and groom within an enclosed temple, separately from the rest of the other deities that were cultivated by the sanctuary. What is going on here? Plouton Helios is mentioned in other places as well. which I find is fascinating. So many believe that this sanctuary is connected to a Pythagorean brotherhood. But what's going on here? Why you have this Pluto, this Hades, who is connected to Core, also known as Persephone? Why is it connected to the sun? You know, because clearly, don't we think of Pluto, of Hades, connected to the underworld? What exactly is going on here? Well, I'll talk more about it, but I do want to do a little bit something else. You guys realize you have to kind of get into the ancient mindset. And when you think about the sun, you think about the sun in the sky, right? Because the sun is always in the sky, right? Wait a second. No, it's not. I mean, it is, but it's from our perspective or the ancient perspective. What happens to the sun? Yeah, the sun descends and there's something called sunset. Well, where does the sun go after that? Right? You know, from the ancient perspective, that sun then goes into the underworld. It goes down below. And then later on, after its trek in the underworld, it comes back again at sunrise, right? So there is then a chthonic underworld belief or perspective in connection to this sun from an ancient reckoning. We even see this obviously with Ra, right? The story of Ra, you know, there's Ra, yeah, Ra, Ra, Ra. And then what happens? Ra goes under the world, right? And fights various demons, and the very bottom meets with Osiris or Isis, depending on the various version of the story, and then rises up, faces Amit, I admit it, who is the great dragon of old, right? And then defeats Amit and rises again as this demon slayer, right? Yes, the midnight sun, somebody says. So this is kind of connecting to this. So this idea of Zeus Kathanos, remember, Zeus connects to the word day, which means sky, right? So Zeus Kathanos means, in a sense, it connects to this idea, and as does, of course, Pluto or Plouton, Helios, the sun. And I just add this in for free, but I'll tell you more about later. It's interesting because the moon is connected also to the consort, which is Persephone or Core. And in ancient reckoning, sometimes Persephone is not connected to the moon, but to the sun. We'll go into that. Don't worry. We'll get there. But we're getting there already. Okay, so what about Hades as Pluto is also talked about by the Romans, and hence he is made the equivalent of their underworld god by the name of Dispater, which they will sometimes say means rich father, and so is connected to the name Pluto, meaning wealthy. Now, the Roman poet by the name of Quintius Aeneas early on associates Dispater with Hades and Pluto. And Cicero himself also does the same thing, says that he is the father of riches. In fact, Cicero declares, quote, "The earth in all its power and plenty is sacred to the father Dis, a name which is the name same as Dives, the wealthy one." So interestingly enough, let's take a look at the Roman version let's take a look at Dispater. We can see an image of this. There he is. There's Dispater. Yet there's another far older name lurking beneath the designation Dispater, which has it at its roots the pre-Indo-European Deus Piter, which as two words. First, Deus means sky, and Piter means father. They have as his consort a Pitwa Mater. Pitwa Mater meaning earth, Pitwa, and mother Mater. Now, when the Indo-Europeans migrated south from the Caucasus and arrived in Greece, the word Deus Piter eventually became Zeus Pater, and so understood as being the sky god that we know so well as directly related to the realm of the sky. This name will continue eastward to India, becoming the father sky god Dias Piter. What interests us is the migrations to the west, for here he becomes Dea Petros for the Illyrians, and by the time he arrives in Italy, he becomes Deus Piter, who is, of course, obviously the sky god, who manifests himself in the daylight. Eventually, he is known either as Eus Pater or Ius Pater by the Latin people, hence, of course, the word Jupiter, the supreme god of the sky who equals that with Zeus. But there is a problem because the sky gods were once associated with the earth goddesses early on, and even as his wife. And in this sense, the higher Jupiter split into two halves. The higher Jupiter was believed to split into two halves. You have a sky aspect, and you have an underworld aspect that resided with the earth goddess, who will eventually be understood as Proserpina, who is the Persephone of the Greek myths. So what happens is this particular Jupiter splits into two, with a heavenly or Olympian version and a chthonic version that is below, that is associated with the goddess. Well, what happens here, as you can see, is it goes, as opposed to calling this god Euspiter or Euspater, they will call this underworld deity Dispater. Dispater. Let's go to the next image. There it is. So you can see it written right there. So we also know that the senator Lucius Catilius encouraged the Senate to celebrate Dispater on two occasions, in 249 BCE with the establishment of the secular games, and in 207 BCE. Now, the story concerning the establishment of the secular games, along with the altar of Dispater and Proserpina, vary. Now, I do want to say this right here, we're talking about, because there's a story about the altar, and you're looking at the actual altar right here. This is the altar that I'll be telling the story about. It was discovered between 1886 and 1887. It was discovered beneath the Corso Vittorio Emanuele. Okay, so the story goes as follows. Here it goes. The story goes that once upon a time, a certain Valesius, who's Sabine by birth, and the ancestor of the first consul, and his in his desperation, was unable to cure his sick children. So he prayed to his household gods, offering up his own life in exchange. But then a voice told him to take them to Tarentum to drink from the waters of the Tiber, and they were he was supposed to heat it up on the altar dedicated to Dispater and Proserpina. So Valesius headed for Tarentum, a Greek colony actually known by that name in southern Italy. But as he passed the site of Rome along the Tiber, Valesius heard a voice instructing him to go to a place called Tarentum that was not located in southern Italy, but would happen to be located there. And so he warmed the water, and he offered at this place various offerings. And then he gave the water that was offered up to his children, who were instantly cured and then fell asleep. When the children woke up, they told him that they had a dream of a figure instructing him to specifically sacrifice to Dispater and Proserpina at this particular Tarentum. So Valesius sent his servants to start digging at Tarentum, the so-called Tarentum at the edge of the Campus Martius in Rome. Here they discovered a round altar situated about 20 feet underground, declaring this to be the altar of Dispater and Proserpina. Following 3 days of public games, the altar was reburied. The altar may have been buried for every celebration and then promptly reburied afterwards. And then the actual altar was discovered, and you're taking a look at it right here. So that's pretty cool, and you can of course read the inscription. It's pretty prominent. Okay, so let's go to the next image. Now, the Sabine people equated Dispater with their own god by the name of Soranus, who was worshipped in Etruria. Those who worshipped him under this guise were known as the wolves of Soranus, who carried about the entrails of the victim at various rituals dedicated to him. They were also known as firewalkers, which is interesting. But this right here, of course, is the image of another one. But before I go there, this is Orcus, and it's pretty small, but I want to say something else. Just want to throw something else just for fun, just to add to it. So I could stop this image. I want to say something, a bit of a trivia, if you will. Okay, so we have this Dispater. So this, which is the underworld kind of Jupiter Zeus that's connected to the Romans. Dispater. Now, there are images of Dispater, and in some cases, he is shown holding a mallet. And this idea of the mallet is that when you're supposed to die, Dispater, who is connected to the underworld and death, will then dispatch you. Book. Now, oftentimes, this mallet is shown in the hands of a certain Charon, who's the messenger of this underworld deity to do the same thing, to do the dirty work. So basically, when you die, the Etruscans and some Romans believe that the god of death basically comes from behind or right in front of you and just goes book and knocks you out with a mallet. And so you have been dispatched, dispatchio, dispater. Now, what's interesting is that this tradition goes into the gladiatorial contests. And so when the gladiators are fighting back and forth, and one of the gladiators is terribly injured and doesn't look like he's going to live, he's in bad shape, what will happen is the crowd will sometimes cry out, dispatchio, dispatchio, dispatchio. And there will actually be somebody dressed as a deity with a mallet. He'll go to the injured, fatally wounded gladiator and take his mallet and go smash like a watermelon on the person's head. Yeah, brutal. Pretty brutal. But these traditions continued on. So being dispatched, so to speak. So interesting little tidbits. Now, let's move on. Now, the Etruscans and later the Romans themselves see Dispater as also associated with the god Orcus, especially when it came to his darker attributes, such as his vengeful nature and his readiness to punish and even torture those whom he disliked. While a temple may have been dedicated to Orcus on the Palatine Hill, for the most part, Orcus was worshipped at a site in rural areas as opposed to urban areas. Again, as in Dispater, the Roman poet Aeneas early on directly associates Orcus with not only Dispater, but also with Hades and Pluto. So Pluto, right? So once again, we have to understand that the word it's cognitively right put together. So you have the word deus, and that idea is retained for the Olympian and the Olympian deity, but the one that goes down towards the earth goddess, it is Dispater, And so there's a difference or change in the morphology of the words to mean different kinds of things. That's just how languages evolve and grow. So as Dispater, as opposed to Deus Pater, right, who becomes Jupiter, Dispater will become more and more associated with Hades and Pluto. And we see this in the poet Aeneas. And according to Aeneas, the Olympians were once simply great men, inclusive of heroes and great generals and statesmen who were basically memorialized in unusual ways, and so eventually became understood as gods. And so, but he makes the association that Hades, Pluto, is indeed this pater. Now, although the Etruscans worshipped Orcus, his name may actually be Greek and related to a demon by the name of Orcus, who was the personification of the curse for those who swear a false oath. So those who swear a false oath, they're, this is the one that makes sure that you get it. In his Works and Days, Hesiod tells how Eris, goddess of strife, gave birth to Orcus, stating that he was the one, quote, whom Eris bore to be a plague on those who take false oaths, unquote. While all days were unlucky to make a bad oath, the fifth day of each month was considered the worst day possible to do so. By the way, you may be interested in this. The demon Orcus will be eventually that word, that idea will move to the north, and it's where we get the name or the idea of orcs. And you guys ever heard of the works of J.R. Tolkien and Lord of the Rings? that's connected to it. Now, Aesop's fables actually refers to these kinds of stories connected to those making false oaths, connected to this deity by the name of Orcus. And it goes as follows. There's a story in Aesop's fables that concerns a man who had taken a deposit from a friend, and when asked to swear an oath regarding it, left the town hurriedly. Now, a lame man whom he met told his fellow traveler that he was Orcus, on his way to track down wicked people. The man asked Orcus how often he returned to the city that they were leaving. And Orcus says, "Oh, I come back after 40 years or sometimes 30. Orcus replied. Believing himself to be free from danger, the man returned the following morning and swore that he had never received the deposit. Almost immediately, Orcus arrived to execute the perjurer by throwing him off a cliff. Protesting, the man asked why the god had said he was not coming back for years, when in fact he did not grant him even a day's reprieve. Orcus replied, "You should also know that if somebody intends to provoke me, I am accustomed to come back again the very same day." So you have these stories coming together, right? So you have these ancient stories of Plutus coming together with the idea of Hades. But now let's go to Hades proper. Let's dive into there right now. Okay, so here we go. Now, the name Hades appears first in the Iliad, which was used. It was obviously used during the time of the Great Dark Ages, but obviously it goes back further. But I have to say this. This is important. And I'm going to have some water because it's relevant, because it appears that Poseidon was the god of the underworld during the Mycenaean era. Did you hear me? Poseidon was the deity of the underworld. This is why this supposedly god of the sea is known as the earth shaker and is associated with horses, not seahorses, mind you, right? According to Mycenaean records, rather than Hades, Persephone was associated with Poseidon, king of the underworld. In fact, even Demeter, in relation to Persephone, is connected to Poseidon instead of Hades. So let's take a look at the next image. So there was discovered in Mycenaean A tablets, B tablets, there it is, a list of sacrificial goods from Pylos, revealing that its designation was the place of the two queens and Poseidon. And also it states to the two queens and the king. Wasno soy, wasna kate. Many scholars assert that the two queens here refer to Demeter and her daughter Persephone. To make matters even more confusing, Persephone herself was often known by the name Athena or Athena. And this most likely goes back to the time of the Minoans. Along with remnants of their stories in later Greek mythology, the Minoans left posterity with several inscriptions that referred to Athena or Demeter or both at the same time. These amounts to a high percentage of linear A religious inscriptions. No other goddesses are referred to as much. But let's take a look. There's another inscription that reads as follows. This is good. I just want to be able to see you guys. You get the idea of the tablets. There's an inscription, PKZA11. It's incomplete, but it reads as follows. It says, "O sun goddess, you were wronged. You are persuaded by the assembly." Break off. "My lady, you appear in a dream." So once again, we have this as a sun goddess. But what I find is really interesting, and here we go. And I'm going to go through this slowly because I want to. Athena is also mentioned in an inscription from Kofinos in southern Crete. And I'm going to go ahead and we're going to work together in translating it. So the first part, it says, so we're going through this here. It goes, Atano Dewiya. Atana Dewiya means Atana is Athena, Dewiya, goddess, right? Torusa, lamented. So Athena, the goddess, I'm sorry. Torusa means distressed. I apologize. Okay, so Atana, Dewija means Athena. Torusa means was distressed. So Athena was distressed, right? Torusa lamented. And then it says Idea and Ida, and it continues, appeared. So we go here and we go to the word here. It's unakanasi, appeared in her dream. And the next part is one of the strong name, epinama, and it says tore her hair, surate. So what is going on here? So you put it together and you read this, and it says basically Athena, who is the goddess, is distressed, and she lamented, and Ida, which of course Ida is connected to the word Demeter. Okay, so Ida meter. So she lamented, and Ida or Demeter appeared in her dream. So you have the situation where this Athena, who will become later known as Kor or Persephone, she's distressed, right? And in her distress, Demeter appears to her in a dream. This is linear B, Mycenaean, right? This is from the 1200s BCE. And of course, Demeter is the one who has the strong name. And it says, tore her hair. Now, what does this mean? Who tore whose hair? Was it, but taking a look at this, it looks as if it may not be tearing the hair per se, selu can also mean to mock. And so the idea is that there is a relationship here. And so it appears that this Athena, this Athena, who is who is Persephone, is upset, but she mocks her mother's attempt to comfort her. And there is this also another possible translation means to cover her in order to find her. So you have this concept going back to the Mycenaean period of time where there's a strange relationship between this Athena, who is Persephone, and mom, who is Demeter, who is Ida, is appearing to her in a dream where there is this separation going on, and she is distressed and is trying to comfort her. And what's happening instead is that she's not happy. She, in many ways, seems to be or could be even running away or hiding. Now, wow. Wait a second. Why would she be? So it's possible that this refers to the journey into the underworld, right? It appears very strongly that this is an echo of that. Isn't that interesting, right? So you see these ideas there, and but what I find is fascinating, because if this translation is correct, it seems or appears to be that Persephone, Demeter, who is Athena, who also becomes known as Athena, is not wanting to go back to mom. That she is in the underworld. She's distressed, but she, in many cases, is being upset, and she seems to be mocking her mother's attempt to comfort her. Okay, so anyway, now what happens now is that let's go on to concerning the birth of Hades. Diodorus Siculus, a Greek historian from the 1st century, states that to Cronus and Rhea, we are told, were born Hestia, Demeter, and Hera, and Zeus, and Poseidon, and Hades. We see this also in Pseudo Polydorus. We see here he's a Greek writer from the 2nd century CE. He writes, he, Cronus, then married his sister Rhea, because both Gaia, earth, and Uranus, heaven, had given him prophetic warning that his rule will be overthrown by a son of his own. He took to swallowing his children at birth. He swallowed his firstborn daughter Hestia, then Demeter and Hera, and after them Plouton, Hades, and Poseidon. Notice that this text refers to Hades as Plouton. But Zeus alone escaped. Hesiod states that Cronus, of course, swallowed each child as each came forth to the womb, to his mother's knees. We actually do have an interesting image of this, so let's go ahead and show it. So Rhea grieved as she was. This is interesting. This is this is an axe that bears the name of the goddess on it. Let's go to the next image. I like that though. It's very small, but this is the image of Kronos, and this is his wife handing him her kids, and he's just about to swallow them. Okay. Oh, we can put that picture down, but you get the idea. So Rhea substituted a stone for Zeus and then hid him away on Mount Ida. And so we have the story. Then, of course, eventually, he frees them, right? He frees them, the kids, and then what happens is you have this battle against the Titans, and let's go to the next image. So now we have, the Olympians are going to fight the designated Titans. So let's take a look at this next image here. When Zeus was grown, he engaged Oceanus, daughter of Metis, as a colleague. And so you have this big battle there. In battle, of course, In preparation for this battle, Zeus is given the power of thunder and lightning, and of course Pluto or Hades is giving the helmet, and the trident is given to Poseidon. And armed with these, the three gods overpower the Titans and confine them to Tartarus, and put those known as the Hecatonius in charge of them. These are three giants. After defeating the Titans, the three brothers divided the world amongst themselves. Let's go to the next image. Oh yeah. Well, let's put this one down temporarily. They divided the world into three. Zeus was given the domain of the sky and the air and was recognized as the overlord. Poseidon was given the sea and all the waters, whereas Hades was given the underworld, the realm of the dead. Each of the other gods was allocated powers according to the nature and proclivities of each. This division is referred to as early as the Iliad in the 8th century BCE. It says as follows. It says, "We are three brothers born by Rhea to Cronus, Zeus, and I, Poseidon, and the third is Hades, lord of the dead men. All was divided amongst us three ways, each given his domain. I, Poseidon, when the lots were shaken, drew the gray seas to live in forever. Hades drew the lot of the mists and the darkness, and Zeus was allotted the wide sky in the clouds and bright air. But earth and high Olympus are common to all three." According to the Homeric hymn to Demeter, from the 7th to the 4th century BCE, it runs as follows. It says, "Adonis, ruler of many, is your Demeter's own brother and born of the same stock. Also for honor, he has the third share, which he received when division was made at the first, and is appointed lord of those amongst whom he dwells." Plato, too, mentions this. He says, by Homer's account, Zeus, Poseidon, and Plouton divided the sovereignty amongst them when they took it over from their father Cronus. Yet when the mighty, now I'll go to this image that we saw earlier. Now when the mighty Typhonius fought Zeus for the realm of heaven, Typhonius, Hades did not come to the aid of his brother, but remained in the underworld. It says, and through the two of them, or though the two of them, Zeus battling Typhonus, through the thunder and lightning, and through the fire from the monster and the scorching winds and blazing thunderbolt, Hades trembled where he rules over the dead below, according to Hesiod's Theogony. Typhonus, by the way, was a storm giant. He had wings so large they were said to brush the stars, with 100 serpent heads for fingers, pointed ears, and eyes of fire. Typhonius was also later identified with a volcano, that being Mount Etna on Sicily. According to Hesiod, he was the result of the love of Gaia for Tartarus. Now, we want to follow here. So it says, now after Zeus had driven the Titans out of heaven, a gigantic Gaia, this is the goddess of the earth, in love with Tartarus, the pit, by means of a golden Aphrodite, bore the youngest of her children, Typhonius. Now, why is that important? Well, it turns out that Typhonius is associated with the underworld, the very underworld that Hades is a part of. So, of course, Hades is not going to help Zeus because this is part of his own realm. But Zeus does indeed eventually defeats Typhonus. He is successful. Let's go to the next image. Plato, via the word of Socrates, discusses Hades and the appointment of the judges of the dead. So Plato has Socrates say, he says, give ear then, as they say, to a right fine story, which you will regard as a fable, I fancy, but I actually an account that is actual. For what I am about to tell you, I mean to offer as the truth. By Homer's account, Zeus, Poseidon, and Plouton divided the sovereignty amongst them when they took it over from their father, Cronus. Now, in the time of Cronus, there was a law concerning mankind, and it holds to this very day amongst the gods, that every man who has passed a just and holy life departs after his decease to the isles of the blessed, and dwells in all happiness apart from ill. Whoever has lived unjustly and impiously goes to the dungeon of requital and penance, which you know they call Tartarus. Of these men there were judges in Cronus's time, and still of late in the reign of Zeus, living men to judge the living upon the day when each was to breathe his last. And thus the cases were being decided amiss. So what's happening here is that before you die, you stand as a living person before your judges, and they decide whether or not you're going to go to the Isles of the Blessed because you have been good in life, or you're going to Tartarus because you were bad. So, but this is referring to that there's something wrong going on, something amiss going on. So Plouton, or Hades, and the overseers from the Isles of the Blessed came before Zeus with the report that they found men passing over to either abode undeserving. So there are those who deserve to go to Tartarus, ending up in the Isles of the Blessed, and those who should go to the Isles of the Blessed, ending up in Tartarus. And so what happens here is, then spoke Zeus. He says, "Nay," said he, "I will put a stop to these proceedings. The cases are now indeed judged ill, and it is because they who are on trial are tried in their clothing, for they are tried alive. And now many," said he, "who have wicked souls are clad in fair bodies and ancestry and wealth, and at their judgment appear many witnesses to testify that their lives have been just." So now, accordingly, those people who are evil, what they do is they dress up. I dress up all fancy. They look good, the exterior, and they have people who are character witnesses saying, "Hey, this is a good guy," when really they're a bad person, right? Meanwhile, of course, he says, now the judges are confounded not only for their evidence, but at the same time by being clothed themselves while they sit in judgment, having their own soul muffled in the veil of eyes and ears and the whole body. So that's interesting. The idea that our flesh, our flesh puppet, gets in the way of us truly understand what is real, really real. Thus, all these are hindrances to them, their own, no less than those of those being judged. Well, first of all, he said, we must put a stop to their foreknowledge of their death. For this they at present foreknow. So what happens is that way back when, supposedly, we knew when we are going to die. And so we got all ready to go, and we stood in judgment at that day, the last day of our life, to decide where we go. So, but now it says, however, Prometheus has already been given the word to stop this in them. Next, they must be stripped bare of all those things before they are tried, for they must stand their trial dead. Their judge also must be naked, dead, beholding with very soul, the very soul of each immediately upon his death, bereft of all his kin, and having left behind on earth all that fine array, to the end of the judgment may be just. So basically, we don't need any more character witnesses and no clothes. We're going to judge the person as is. Now I, knowing all this before you, have appointed sons of my own to be judges, 2 from Asia, Benios and Radamanus, and 1 from Europe, Achaeus. These, when their life is ended, shall give judgment in the meadow at the dividing of the road, whence are the two ways leading, one to the Isles of the Blessed and the others to Tartarus. So you have this road that divides two. So we're understanding more about Hades as a result of the underworld. We'll learn more about the god in a few moments. And so there is a path that happens to be, if you're curious, on the right that leads to the Isles of the Blessed, and the one on the left that leads to Tartarus. And those who come from Asia shall have Rhadamanthus to try them, and those from Europe, Achaeus, and to Minos I will give the privilege of the final decision, if the other two are in any doubt, that the judgment upon this journey of mankind might be supremely just, unquote. All right, so there you have, he's the judge there. There's the three-headed god, dog. Let's go to the next one. Next image. Oh, wow, this is pretty small. Okay, well, we're going to go into, you take that one down. So let's take a look at what Hades looked like. We can discern much of what Hades looked like according to the Greeks from iconography on various vases in connection to the Eleusinian mysteries, that one you just saw. And we can see that while he is understood as also Pluto, each will have different attributes. In general, both Hades and Pluto images look much like Zeus in many ways, being very dignified and mature looking, with long hair and a beard exactly like that of the sky god. Although sometimes the hair of Hades is white, pure white. While in other descriptions, it is dark and connected to his darker attributes. Both as Hades and Pluto, this god is very often shown holding a scepter. In the Eleusinian context, if he is identified as a Pluto, he will often be standing. Let's go to the next image. He will often be standing, often in the company of either Demeter or Persephone, and be fully clothed, and he will hold a cornucopia intended in association with his bounteous wealth arriving from out of the earth, and may even hold stalks of grain. Yet if he is called specifically Hades, he is often reclining. Next image, typically bare-chested, or at least more clothed, and if holding a drinking horn, it is not a cornucopia. Also, Hades will never be shown holding stalks of grain. So that will be an interesting association. So while Hades lived in a very dark realm, let's go to the next image, he himself was not necessarily dark. Look at that. Look at that cornucopia there. In fact, he was viewed as somewhat pale. Let's go to the next image. Although he's kind of red here, right? So sometimes he grows pale in the shadow, in many ways. He is also crowned with a wreath made of ebony in many counts. Let's go to the next image. Oh, that's a great image. I like that one quite a bit of Hades. You can see here, he's got kind of curly hair along with the beard. Let's go to the next image. Okay, so you can kind of see the crown here. Let's go to the next image. There we go. So the first century CE Stoic philosopher by the name of Carnutus asserted Pluto wore a wreath of what is called a Phasgonian, often called a Xiphon, traditionally identified as a type of gladiolus. So let's take a look at the next image. There you can see there again, this crown, this wreath. Let's go to the next image. That's a gladiolus. Now this is pretty, right? It's pretty nice. So Pluto or Hades is wearing a crown made of these flowers. It is generally regarded as a flowering plant, related to the iris family. In fact, Dioscorides recorded the medical uses for this plant. It is used for extracting stings, helping with thorns. It was mixed with wine and frankincense as well. The plant was also used as an aphrodisiac as well as a contraceptive. It grew in humid places. In one obscure passage, Cornutus seems to connect Pluto wearing of this to the etymology for avernus, but it is just in many cases it is described as being bluish gray or greenish or sea color. So I find it interesting that here you have a Zeus who is not dark, but he is pale in skin, and he's wearing something that is so light. Let's go to the next image. While the horses of Hades are sometimes black, there are many exceptions, as you see right here. For Ovid in the first century describes his horses as actually being sky colored. Sometimes his horses are blue and sometimes greenish blue to dark blue. And in many cases, they are the same color as his wreath, which I find again as fascinating, right? Okay, let's take that image down. That's great. So it's not what you expect. You're expecting this dark and brooding deity, where in many cases he is pale, he is light, he has white hair, although sometimes he has black hair. We oftentimes picture him with black horses, but so often they're not black at all. They're light colored, they're blue or they're green, just like what he wears. His crown on his head is bright. Now, let's talk about, he's also known for his keys. Now, the keys of Hades, these are connected to his bounteous nature, where he's able to unlock the energy of nature upon humanity, blessing us with annual fruits. Because, hey, guess what? Hades is in the underworld, but he's down in the underworld. But what's above that is the soil, the fertile soil. So not only, of course, is Demeter, who is the earth, connected to the soil, and not only Persephone, but Hades too, being that masculine aspect. In his travelogue, the writer by the name of Pausanias describes a carved cedar chest deposited within the temple of Hera at Elis. It has many panels depicting various gods and spirits, including nymphs, and it includes Dionysus and Persephone. One of them depicted Pluto holding the keys, and he notes that he holds them because, quote, they say that what is called Hades has been locked up by Pluto and that nobody will return back again therefrom. Interesting. So, in other words, Pausanias is noting that the keys are an attribute of Pluto, as the scepter is of Zeus, and the trident is of Poseidon or Neptune. So you have this kind of connection. There is also, of course, a golden key that was laid on the tongue of initiates by the priests of Eleusis and was a symbol of the revelation that they were obligated to keep a secret. A key is amongst the attributes of other infernal deities such as Hecate and Anubis and Persephone, and thus who act as guardians or timekeepers such as Janus and Aeon. But what I find is interesting is also, oh, by the way, another little bit is Aeacus, one of the three mortal kings who become judges in the afterlife, is also known as holder of the keys and a priestly doorkeeper in the court of Pluto and Persephone. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, so he's holding the keys. This sounds familiar. Keys and connection to the world. Well, guess what? This idea is picked up in Christianity. And so in Revelation 1:18, it has Jesus say, it says, I am the living one. I was dead, and look, I am alive forever and ever, and I hold the keys of death and Hades. What is going on here? Hades, wait a second. And they do in the Bible, it is using the little word hadu, use it in the, of course, genitive. It's using the word Hades. So what's happening here is early Christians are saying in the book of Revelation is that it's not Hades that has the keys to the underworld. It is Jesus who has the keys to the underworld. But they're using the same ideas. They are paralleling the mythology connected with Hades into a Christian understanding. And of course, the keys are also found in Matthew 16 through 19, right? And I tell you, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build, the church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Gates of hell, which we'll talk about the gates of hell in a little bit. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bound on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whoever you will bound on earth shall be bound in heaven. Which is interesting. I want to bring this up briefly. When I cursed will be cursed, sorry, in heaven. What I think is interesting is that this idea of the keys are connected also to oath keeping, which is also another aspect that is connected with Hades, and you're seeing it here echoing in a sense within Christianity. So, so there you have that. Okay, so let's go to the next image. Hades was also associated with cypress trees, a tree connected with mourning. Many Greeks, for instance, those living in Attica, covered their homes in cypress garlands. Wood from cypress trees were also added to the kindling and cremations to purify the air, of course. There's also the story of Caressus, who was transformed into a cypress, who was consumed by grief over the accidental death of a pet stag. A white cypress is part of the topography of the underworld that recurs in the Orphic gold tablets as a kind of beacon near the entrance, perhaps to be compared with the tree of life in various world mythologies. The description of the cypress as white, since the botanical tree is dark, is symbolic, evoking the white garments worn by initiates or the clothing of a corpse, or maybe the pallor of the dead. In Orphic funeral rites, it was forbidden to make coffins of cypresses. So I find that interesting. Let's go to the next image. One very odd attribute supposedly connected to Hades was his helmet of invisibility. Pseudo Apollodorus in his Bibliotheca relates much of what we already knew from Hesiod's Theogony, with the exception of a story related to the Cyclops, wherein he gives each of the three Olympian brothers a gift with which he might fight the Titans. As I said before, Zeus received thunder and lightning, Poseidon was given his mighty trident, and Pluto, he got this helmet. Apparently, this was a helmet or cap. And now the verbal play of adios can also mean invisible. And Hades is thought to account for this attribution of the helmet to the ruler of the underworld. In other words, this is a helmet of invisibility. Yet we do know, of course, other gods did use it, namely Athena, who wore this cap of invisibility in one instance during the Trojan War. Even used it to be invisible to Ares when she aided Diomedes, his enemy. Her assistance even enabled Diomedes to injure the god of war with a spear. So you have this idea there. The next one, you take this one down because I don't have an image of it. Another attribute of Hades, so you can take this one down. We'll be talking about the iris in a few seconds, though. That's good. Another attribute of Hades was his bident, not his trident, but his bident. So we don't have any image from antiquity that shows it, but the word is mentioned. Of course, obviously, this means there's two prongs. A bident was an agricultural implement. It may also represent one of the three types of lightning that was wielded by Jupiter, who is a Roman counterpart of Zeus, and also connects to another connection to a father deity, the Etruscan Pania. So you see this here. So you have this idea of bident. So this is the infernal aspect. Okay. Now, central to the story of Hades is the tale of Demeter and her daughter Persephone, which, granted, has many versions. So basically, one day, let's go to this next image. One day, the beautiful Persephone, also known as Kor, which simply means maiden, was visiting one of her favorite places for flowers, just below the slopes of Mount Etna in Sicily. And there is this beautiful narcissus that caught her eye. And so she reached out to pluck it. Well, all of a sudden, the entire earth began to unravel at her feet. Meanwhile, Artemis and Aphrodite and Athena, who were also along for this flower excursion, suddenly noticed that Persephone was missing. Demeter panicked and then began to frantically search for her missing daughter. In fact, the Homeric hymn to Demeter states, "She rent the coverings upon her divine hair with her dear hands. Her dark cloak she cast down from both her shoulders. Queenly Deo wandered over the earth with flaming torches in her hands." Let's go to the next image. During the initial days of her search, Demeter found no clue of her daughter's possible whereabouts. Sometimes, with frustrated anger, she torched the earth. She refused to drink any nectar and eat ambrosia or even to bathe. But after 9 days, Hecate appeared before Demeter, telling her that all she knew was something had happened to her, hearing her cries, but not seeing where she went. Demeter realized of all the gods, Helios, the deity of the sun, was the one to ask, for he saw everything from his position high in the sky. And Helios did indeed know where she went, but more importantly, he even knew why. Helios told Demeter that Zeus promised Hades, lord of the underworld, their daughter's hand in marriage without even consulting her. Worse still, Helios added that he rather thought it was a good match. Well, Demeter was full of sorrow. Becomes very distracted. Let's go to the next image. In fact, she accidentally ate Pelops' shoulder, which was another long story. Demeter's depression began to affect her work of providing her vital life force, sustenance for trees to provide fruit, the earth to provide vegetables, and the fields to harvest grain for bread. And so she became, with her earth, barren. And as this feminine aspect began to become weakened, and in fact, she became the old Cretan woman that roamed the earth. And one time she even reached the well and began to cry. This will connect to the Eleusinian mysteries. But eventually, because Demeter's mood did not improve, she started to fall further and further into depression. What happens is that food was now, there's not enough to offer food for humanity. Humanity was unable to feed itself. And knowing not the secret of agriculture that was part of the mysteries, Zeus realized that he had to placate his sister wife, and so he sent Hermes down to Hades to fetch Persephone in order to reunite her with her mother, so the earth would come to life again. Let's go to the next image. Now, Hades agreed to let her return to the realm of life, but first a feast was ordered as a special send-off for her. Now, Persephone, this is Persephone shown here, had observed the fast the entire time she was in the underworld. She was so upset about being so forcefully removed from her mother. Now relieved, she had a little something to eat, namely a pomegranate seed. In some cases, she took 6 pomegranate seeds. And just then she realized she had made a mistake. For eating any food from the underworld made that person partly of the underworld itself. Now, let's go to the next image. Some myths had it that she was actually torn. You see, she had learned to actually love her new husband, but she also loved her mother as well. And so she was unable to decide. So in this case, the eating of the pomegranate seed led to a meeting and an agreement. So she, in other words, she ate these pomegranate seeds intentionally, on purpose, to force a meeting, to force an agreement. Let's go to the next image. So while Persephone was to spend spring and summer with her mother Demeter, sometime during the fall, she was to descend into the underworld and spend the winter with her husband Hades. Demeter agreed, but added that during those winter months, when her daughter was not with her, she would not let seeds sprout from the earth. Hence, this story became the explanation for the changes of the season. Demeter also decided to give away some of her mysteries to humanity, teaching Celsus' son by the name of Tritolemus the art of agriculture to share with whoever would listen. And so the knowledge then of agriculture spread throughout the world. But who was Persephone? And how did she end up being so closely related to Demeter? Let's go to the next image. As already discussed, many but not all Greeks came to view Persephone as the daughter of Demeter and Zeus. And the story of her abduction into the underworld and a return of Demeter above represents, as you know, the cycles of life, thriving in spring and summer, dying in fall, and being dormant or appearing dead in winter. In essence, Persephone is a vegetative goddess. The name Persiphata is often translated as meaning female thresher of corn. Perso, Indo-European word related to the Sanskrit parsa, by the way, means sheaf of corn. And the second means, of course, is a Proto-Indo-European word meaning to strike. As far as the origins of Persephone is concerned, she connects to many vegetative goddesses throughout Anatolia and Syria and Mesopotamia, with many of them having variant forms of an abduction story as well. The typical cycle has it that Persephone gives birth to the god of the new year, who then becomes her lover, impregnates her, and after he dies, she gives birth to him again the next year. The early goddesses who would eventually evolve into Persephone were chthonic or underworld deities who possessed the power of fertility and who also received souls into the underworld. As much as the cult of Demeter is, in general is important, Persephone herself has Minoan precedents. In fact, upon a Minoan plate from the Old Palace period at Phaistos, a goddess is portrayed as growing directly out of the ground, which is also very flower-like in appearance, having no arms and legs, with dancing girls surrounding her who move amongst the flowers. And you can see that in this picture right here. Was this the representation of the ascent of Persephone? Is her flower-like appearance connected in some way to her picking the flower that led to Hades? Another image coming from a Minoan gold ring from Isopata shows a similar goddess suspended in the sky with three dancing girls below the arms raised in worship. Let's go to the next image. The Minoans knew this vegetative goddess as a divine child who both died and came back to life every year and was related to the goddess Eridanian. In Minoan religion, the deities, mostly all female, made their appearance following ecstatic dancing and as well as tree shaking. So this is a possibility. The ancient legend of Persephone being designated as the god of death at the beginning of time, while Zeus is given the reins over the realm of life, is preserved by pseudo-Hyginus, which is written sometime in the 2nd century CE. And it says as follows. So you can put this down for a second. Thank you for showing those images. When Cura or Cor or Persephone was crossing a certain river, she saw some clay mud. She took it up thoughtfully and began to fashion a man. While she was pondering on what she had done, Zeus came up. Cura asked him to give the image life, and Zeus readily granted this. When Cor wanted to give it her name, Zeus forbade it and said that his name should be given it. But while they were disputing about the name, Gaia, or Tellus, or Demeter, arose and said that it should have her name, since she had given her own body. They took this all up to Cronus, or Saturn, for the judge. He seemed to have decided for them. Zeus, since you gave him life, you are connected to, it is connected to the fate of men. By the way, there's a kind of a hole here in the manuscript. Let her, Persephone, receive his body after death, and since Cora fashioned him, and let her, Gaia, possess him as long as he lives. But since there is controversy about his name, let him be called Homo, since he seems to be made from hummus, unquote. In the Orphic myths, while Zeus is often seen as the father of Persephone, it is also true that he later seduces her in the form of a serpent and makes her pregnant with Dionysus or Zagreus, whom Zeus wishes to make king of heaven. But of course, obviously, this intrigue makes Hera upset, and Dionysus, Zagreus, is cut up and eaten by the Titans. Most mystery traditions assert that when Hades was the husband of Persephone, I'll say it again, most mystery traditions assert that when Hades was the husband of Persephone, he was very kind to her, that he loved her very much, and he was absolutely faithful. A depiction that will contradict sort of some of the more popular sources. So in the mystery religions, he is faithful. There is a story, and it is a story of a problem, which I'll go into right now, and that is connected to mint. So this story goes as follows. Well, Persephone favored many. Many also received the wrath of Persephone, inclusive of mint. We find mint, first of all, mentioned in Strabo, who records mint, according to myth, became the concubine of Hades, was trampled underfoot by Cor, or Persephone, and was transformed into a garden mint, the plant some called Hideosmus. She turned into a plant. There's a more detailed account of mint's demise is found in Oppian from the 3rd century CE. And in this case, it is not Persephone who tramples her, but her mother, Demeter. It says mint, men say, was once a maid beneath the earth, a nymph of Coctus, and she lay in the bed of Hades. But when he took the maid Persephone from the hill of Mount Ida, then she complained loudly with overweening words and raved foolishly for jealousy, and Demeter in anger trampled upon her with her feet and destroyed her. For she had said that she was nobler in form and more excellent in beauty than dark-eyed Persephone, and she boasted that Hades would return to her and banish the others from his halls. Such infatuation leapt upon her tongue, and from the earth spray the weak herb that bears her name came about. Now, I do want to say this. In the first version that we see here by Strabo, it appears that there had been some impropriety. But in the second version that we see by Oppian, it turns out that that Hades was with Mint and actually left Mint and chose Persephone instead. That's right. And she didn't like it, and mom took care of it. Demeter mom took care of it, stamped her out. Now, it turns out that Hades actually had somebody before Mint. So there was, so basically, while Persephone was after Mint, did I actually just say after Mint? I'm sorry. While Persephone was after Mint, there was somebody who's before Mint. Before Mint. And that deity was named Luke. So basically these are so it's Luke and then Mint and then Persephone. So Luke, by the way, does predate, most scholars agree, does predate Persephone. Luke was a nymph, a daughter of Oceanus, who was carried off by Hades, and together they lived and loved one another until the days of her life ran its natural course. So in this case, she is immortal. After her death, Hades changed her, go to the next image, changed her into a white poplar tree. Changed her into that, right? In Elysium, in order to remember how much he loved her. So I should have made it clear. Luke was a nymph, but she has a mortal aspect to her. She does have a certain march of days that she existed. And so when she dies, she's made into a white poplar. Hence, the white poplar became sacred to Hades. If one looks at the white poplar tree, one will notice that the leaves are white on one side and oftentimes dark on the other, representing the world of light above and the world of darkness below. So you have this idea there. So I think we're getting into the personal life of Hades. So he has three women in his life. But Persephone is the last and final one, and no other followed her after that. Let's go to the next image. Many stories of Hades revolve around the figure of Orpheus, especially regarding when Orpheus came to the underworld, seeking to return the return of his love, Eurydice. Let's go to the next image. As Eurydice, right? As we know, Hades and Persephone were moved by his pleas and agreed to let her return, right? In fact, Pseudo Apollodorus says, when Orpheus's wife, Eurydice, died from a snake bite, Orpheus descended into Hades' realm with the desire to bring her back up to the earth and persuade Plouton, or Hades, to release her. Plouton promised to do this if on the return trip, Orpheus would not turn around before reaching his own home. But he disobeyed and turned to look at his wife, who thereupon went back down again. Oh, such a sad story. This is an early image of this. Without doubt, the most exhaustive ancient treatment of the story of Orpheus in relation to Hades was recorded in the 1st century by Ovid in his Metamorphoses. He says as follows. He says, the new wed bride fell dying when a serpent struck her heel. And when at last the bard Orpheus had mourned his fill at the wide world above, he dared descend through Tenera's dark gate to Styx to make trial of the shades. And through the thronging wraiths and grave-spent ghosts, he came to pale Persephone and him, Dominus Umbarium, or Lord of the Shades, who rules the unlovely realm. And as he struck his lyre's sad chords, he said, ye deities who rule the world below, whether we mortal creatures all return, if simple truth, direct and genuine, may be your leave be told, I have come down not with the intent to see the glooms of Tartarus, nor to enchain the triple snake necks of Medusa, but for my dear wife's sake, in whom a trodden viper poured his venom and stole her budding years. My heart has sought strength to endure the attempt I'll not deny, but love has won a god whose fame is fair in the world above. But I doubt, though here too I surmise, and if that ancient tale of Ravenous is true, you two were joined in love. Now, I want to stop there. I surmise if that ancient tale of ravishment is true, you two were joined in love. So this is echoing another story, a story where it's not the rape of Hades. It is this joining of love between the two. I'm telling you, there's another story that is there that may even echo all the way back to the Minoan, Mycenaean times. He says, remember, he says, if that ancient tale is true, if it's an ancient tale, so there's an earlier story here that you two were joined in love. Now, by these regions filled with fear, by this huge chaos, these vast silent realms reweave, I implore the fate unwound too fast by my love. To you are owed ourselves and all creation. A brief while we linger, then we hasten, late or soon to one abode. Here on road leads us all. Here in the end is home. Over humankind your kingdom keeps the longest of sovereignty. She too, when ripening years reach her due term, shall own your rule. The favor that I ask is but to enjoy her love. And so what happens is he's playing this, Orpheus is singing, and what happens is all the bloodless spirits wept to hear it, and Tantalus forgot the fleeing water, and Zachon wheel was tranced, and Dianades laid down their urns, and the vultures left their feast, and Sisyphus sat wrapped upon his stone. The Eumenides, or the Furies' cheeks, it is said, were wet with tears. He made the Furies weep. Let's take down this image. He made the Furies weep on behalf of his wife, right? And the queen, Persephone. And he whose scepter rules the underworld could not deny the prayer and called her forth. She was not to look back. But unfortunately, as they're about to get out, she started to slip. She grabbed her, but he looked back to hold her so she doesn't fall. And unfortunately, this poor soul became naught but the yielding air. And so she dies once again. It's a very sad story, right? Seneca talks about this story too. Orpheus had the power to bend the ruthless lords of the shades by song and suppliant prayer. when he sought back his Eurydice, the art which had drawn the trees and birds and rocks, which had stayed the course of rivers, at whose sound the beasts had stopped to listen, soothes the underworld with unaccustomed strains and rings out clear in those unhearing realms. In fact, in this version, Hades exclaims, "We own defeat. Go forth to the upper world. Yet by this appointed doom, fare thou as comrade behind thy husband, and thou look not back upon thy wife." And so you have this story. Now, I want to mention something else. While Horace and other ancient writers asserted that Hades was incapable of tears, unlike Persephone, who was capable of tears, according to Claudian, Hades is depicted as being moved, and with iron cloak, he wipes his tears. What? Hades himself cries. By the way, according to Lucian, who writes between 125 to 180 CE, there's something that changed about Hades. You see, according to Lucian of Samosata, Pluto's love for Persephone changed him. It made him more sensitive to the things of love. Lucian also, in his Dialogue of the Dead, has Pluto questioning Protesilaus, the first hero killed because of the Trojan War, since he wanted to return to the world above. Pluto asks him, "You are then in love with life? Such lovers we have here in plenty, but they love an object which none of them can obtain." Protesilaus explains, like an Orpheus in reverse, that he has left behind a young bride whose memory even the lathed waters of forgetting have not erased from him. Pluto assures him that death will reunite them someday. But Protesilaus argues that Pluto himself should, he says, understand love and its impatience, and reminds the king of his grant to Orpheus. And he goes on and on. Once again, so we're seeing lots of testimony. I'm giving you more that Persephone changes Hades. He's not exactly that furious, wrathful kind of deity as he was before. He changes in many ways. We also find Hades in stories related to Hercules. Let's go to the next image. There we go. Okay, so there's Herc right there. First, Hades is in the story of Hercules and Cerberus. Accordingly, Hercules asks Hades during his 12th labor if he should bring the mighty bound Cerberus from Hades. According to the 2nd century CE Pseudo-Apollodorus, records the adventure as follows. It says, desiring to supply the souls with blood, he slaughtered one of Hades' cattle. Their keeper, Menenites, challenged Heracles to a wrestling match. Heracles hugged his torso and broke his ribs, but set him down at the request of Persephone. Heracles asked Pluto for Cerberus, which is of course the multi-headed dog here, and was told to take the hound if he could overpower it without using any of the weapons he had brought with him. When Heracles came to lead out the three-headed dog, they trapped him, begged his promise of protection. He obtained the favor from Pluto and brought them out unharmed. So you have stories there of Hercules in this particular story. There's a second story that I'm probably not going to go into as fast. I'll mention this. A second story of Hercules in relation to Hades is the story of Queen Alcestis, who decided to sacrifice her life for that of her husband, Admetos. And of course, the story again, Apollodorus mentions this, that Apollo obtained from the Moirai or the Fates a privilege for King Adamus, whereby when it was time for him to die, he would be released from his death if someone should volunteer to die in his place. When his day to die came, his wife, Alcestis, died for him. Cor, or Persephone, however, sent her back. Yes. Wow. In fact, in some sources, you have this. So yeah, she refuses to do this. A third story involved Hercules and the siege of Pylos, where Hercules wounded Hades. That happened in the battlefield there. So you have that story as well. So let's go to the next story. Okay, so this is the story of Sisyphus. Remember the guy that was forced to roll an immense boulder in the underworld, and then of course perpetually forever, and then of course it'd roll back down. You would have to push it up all over again. Well, there's another story with this connected to Hades. In the 5th century BCE, Asclepius, excuse me, in his lost play, Sisyphus, the Runaway, told a story about Hades in relation to Sisyphus. The story basically, we do have an outline of it. Basically, what happens, it's kind of a satire. So basically, it is the escape from Hades by the crafty Corinthian king. According to this story, it goes as follows. Zeus sent Thanatos, death, against Sisyphus, who is also known as the babbler. But Sisyphus bound Thanatos, or death, fast. So when he bounds death, men cease to die until Ares came to the rescue, releases Thanatos, and gave Sisyphus into his power. Before he died, however, Sisyphus directed that his wife, Merope, that she should omit his funeral rites so that Hades would be deprived of his customary offerings. And so he was persuaded by the cunning trickster to let him go back to life in order to complain to his wife that she should not have neglected the offerings to Hades. Well, it's a trick. But of course, once in the upper world, he refuses to leave. And so what happens is Hades sends Hermes to take Sisyphus back. And then, of course, we have the story of the rolling stone that follows after that. Okay, so Sisyphus. Now, there's another story. Let's go to the next image. Okay. This is the story of Perseus and Theseus. This is a very strange story. Perseus and Theseus. Perseus, you can see here, he's a laph, which is basically like a centaur. You can see there. What he wants to do, Perseus, this centaur-like being, he wants to abduct Persephone. So, yes, of course, he's going to be caught for such an impiety. And then, of course, Hades will bind him to a stone chair where he was to be punished for all eternity. But the story is kind of interesting. What happens is that Perseus and Theseus decided that they're going to go down together and to seek the hand of Persephone in marriage. He does ask Theseus to join with him. And unfortunately, Theseus had made an oath. And so because it's his blood brother, he had no choice but to join him in this madcap adventure. Although Theseus would later on be released, I do want to say that Obviously, it's not the same um, uh, for the unfortunate satire like a creature. In fact, Seneca tells the story as follows. He says, "Through the deep shades of the pool, which none recrosses, is he, Theseus, faring, this brave recruit of a madcap suitor, Pirithous, that from the very throne of the infernal king Hades he may rob and bear away his wife Persephone. He hurries on, a partner in mad folly, him nor fear nor shame held back, and there in the depths of the underworld he seeks adultery and an unlawful bed." So Seneca then goes on, "Suppose that Theseus is indeed held fast in the underworld, hidden away in Lethean depths, must suffer a Stygian death. But of course, he is free. But unfortunately, the one who sought to do that is chained and trapped there." Okay, let's um, let's take this down temporarily. I want to tell another story briefly. Another story of the wrath of Hades pertains to, of all things, Asclepius. Diodorus asserted as follows. He says it was believed that he, Asclepius, had brought back to life many who had died. Remember, Asclepius is connected to medicine, to healing. So, consequently, the myth goes on to say Hades brought accusations against Asclepius, charging him before Zeus of acting to the detriment of his own province. For he said the number of the dead was steadily diminishing now that men were being healed by Asclepius. So Zeus, in indignation, slew Asclepius with a thunderbolt. So what happens is Asclepius is healing too many men. Too many men and too many women, too many people are living. And Hades is like, hey, I need some more customers here in the underworld. And so what happens is Asclepius is struck dead. This is not a great story. And as a result, of course, the dead keep coming again. There is an Aesop fable that's connected to this from the 6th century BCE that actually alludes to Asclepius, but it's a little different. And I want to tell you the story. Here it goes. There was once a doctor who knew nothing about medicine. So in other words, this is not really a doctor. So okay, there was once a doctor who knew nothing about medicine. One of his patients was feeling quite weak, but everyone insisted, "Don't give up. You will get well. Your illness is the sort that lasts for a while, but then you will feel better." The doctor, however, the so-called doctor, I should say, marched in and declared, "I'm not going to play games with you or tell you lies. You need to take care of all your affairs because you are going to die. You are not going to last more than another day." Having said this, the doctor did not even bother to come back again. After a while, the patient recovered from his illness and was venturing outdoors, although he was not fully steady yet on his feet, says the story, when the doctor ran into the patient. He greeted him and asked how all the people down in Hades were doing. Because he just assumes he died, right? How are all the people down in Hades, how are they doing? The patient said, "Oh, they are taking it easy, drinking the waters of Lethe. But Persephone and the mighty god Pluto were just now threatening terrible things against all doctors, since they keep the sick people from dying. Every single doctor was denounced, and they were ready to put you at the top of the list." This scared me, so I immediately stepped forward and grasped their royal scepters as I solemnly swore that this was simply a ridiculous accusation, since you are not readily a doctor at all. Which, of course, he wasn't. Okay. Finally, there is a story of Hades' wrath as related to the Coronades. The story goes that Hades and Persephone inflicted the city of Thebes with a deadly plague, probably as a punishment for King Creon's refusal to allow the burial of the dead warriors of the army of the seven against Thebes. Well, that's a good reason. When the maiden Coronades sacrificed themselves to appease the gods, they were pitied and transformed them into comets. So here is the story briefly told by Antonius Liberalis. He says, when plague seized Ionia, many died. There were sent officers to consult Apollo's oracle at Gortynai. The god replied that they should make an appeal to the two gods of the underworld, Hades and Persephone. He said that they would cease from their anger if two willing maidens were sacrificed. Of course, none of the maidens of the city complied with the oracle until the servant woman reported the answers to the daughters of Orion. And so they were at work at the loom, and soon as they heard about that, they willingly accepted death on behalf of their fellow citizens before the plague had smitten them too. They cried out 3 times to the gods of the underworld, saying that they were willing sacrifices. They thrust their bodkins into themselves at their shoulders and gashed at their own throats, and they both fell down into the earth. But Persephone and Hades took pity on the maidens and made their bodies disappear, setting them instead up out of the earth and made them into heavenly bodies. When they appeared, they were borne up into the sky, and men called them comets, unquote. Wow. So there you have it. Let's go to the next image. But Hades continues on. What happens here is that during the Hellenistic era, the traditional Egyptian gods like Isis and Osiris underwent a transformation, with the first becoming a goddess in connection with the Greek mystery cult, and the second mixed with other gods, including Osiris, including the Greek Hades, to become the hybrid Greek god known as Serapis. Egyptian and Greek wisdom traditions also became associated with the legendary sage Hermes Trismegistus, evolving into Hermetic writings by the 2nd and 3rd century CE. So there was a divine triad that comes about in Egypt under the Ptolemies, and was conceived to be understood as a family in relations, with the first being the father, known as Serapis, who was understood as the transcendent and universal cosmic creator, ruler of earth and heaven, and also known as Hades. Wow, right? So with this said, most scholars see Serapis as then a combination between the Egyptian Osiris and Apis, as well as the Greek Hades. As you know, Osiris is the god of the underworld, the afterlife, and the dead, while his wife Isis is the goddess of the realm of life, of nature, and of magic. Osiris was believed to have been once king of Egypt, but then was murdered by Seth and cut into pieces. The story goes that Isis collected all the pieces but could not find his phallus, and so created a magic phallus, becoming pregnant and giving birth to Horus, who became king of Egypt. The idea is that Horus literally possesses Pharaoh. Meanwhile, Osiris became king of the underworld, right? Osiris becomes king of the underworld. See the connection? And so Pharaoh becomes him upon death. As for Apis or Hapis, he was a bold deity originally worshipped about Memphis and was known to act as an intermediary between the all-powerful god, sometimes understood as Osiris or even Ta or Atum, with humanity. Serapis would also be identical with some other ones too, but Plutarch tells the story. Let's go to the next image. Tells the story. Looks like just like Hades, right? How the cult of Serapis started under Ptolemy I and goes as follows. Ptolemy Soter saw in a dream the colossal statue of Pluto at Sinope, not knowing nor having even seen how it looked. And in his dream, the statue bade him convey it with all speed to Alexandria. He had no information and no means of knowing where the statue was situated, but as he related the vision to his friends, there was discovered for him a much traveling man by the name of Sosibus, who said that he had seen at Sinope just such a great statue as the king thought he saw. Ptolemy therefore sent him, and Dionysus, who, after considerable time and with great difficulty, and not without the help of divine providence, succeeded in stealing the statue and bringing it away. When it had been conveyed to Egypt and exposed to view, Timotheus, the expositor of sacred law, and Manathea and their associates conjectured that it was the statue of Pluto. Basing this conjecture on the Cerberus and the serpent with it, and they convinced Ptolemy that it was the statue of none other of the gods but Serapis himself. And so what will happen is that it combines. So yes, you have now Hades will be now identified with Osiris, the god also of the underworld of the Egyptians. It will meld together, and the result will be this deity by the name of Serapis. So there we go. So let's move now into the underworld. So we have a good, strong understanding of my throat. I'm sorry. Of Pluto, of Hades. Let us move now and talk about a little bit about the underworld. I know it's getting a little bit late, but I do want to have a few words about this underworld architecture, so we have an idea here about what it is. Okay, so oh, by the way, now I'll just keep on going. Okay. Sorry, I kind of dropped the pages here. So that's what I get by talking about all these different topics here. Okay. Give me a few minutes here. Dun, 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 dun. So let's play some music. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. All right. Here we go. Let's talk about the Orphic mysteries. You gotta love, all the stuff that goes on behind scenes, right? So, fortunately, the good news is that I number my pages. You just have to laugh at yourself there. Okay, in the Orphic mysteries, this underworld god is known more often as Hades than Pluto. Here, Hades is understood as a god who brings concord in relationships, along with Persephone. Greek metrical inscriptions from the end of the 4th century BCE also present Hades and Persephone together, with one epitaph proclaiming, "I know that even below the earth, if there is indeed a reward for the worthy ones, the first and foremost honors, nurse, shall be yours next to Persephone and Pluto." In the Orphic hymn to Pluto, the underworld deity is declared as a strong-spirited and all-receiving who commands death and is a master of mortals. So this is a very positive understanding. In fact, his titles are both Zeus Cathanas and Eubolus, or the one who gives good counsel. Hades here dwells in Tartarus, which is described as a meadow or thick shaded in the dark, where the Acheron encircles the roots of the earth. Hades is also, of course, the name of the area too. We have the representation of Hades in various philosophical cosmological systems is quite diverse. In the Clementine literature, its final form, which dates from the 4th century, includes a theogony that was influenced by Hesiod, with added features from the Orphic mysteries. We're looking at a representation of it here. Accordingly, when the primordial elements came together by orderly cyclonic force, they produced a generative sphere, the egg from which the primeval Orphic entity, Phanes, this is what you're looking at. This is Phanes. Phanes is located here within the egg, is born, and the world is formed. So the world is formed from this egg. Now, the release of Phanes and his ascent to the heavenly top of the world egg causes the matter left in the sphere to settle in relation to its weight, creating the tripartite world of the traditional theogonies. The description continues, stating, its lower part, the heaviest element, sinks downward and is called Pluto because of its gravity and its weight within, of course, the great quantity of matter. After the separation of this heavy element in the middle part of the egg, the water flows together, which they call Poseidon. The purest and noblest element, the fire, is called Zeus because its nature is glowing. It flies right up into the air and draws up the spirit, now called Metis, that was left in the underlying moisture. And then, when the spirit has reached the summit of the ether, it is devoured by Zeus. So you have this idea. So Hades, or the underworld, is the realm that descends, that falls. Let's go to the next image. All right. So this is, of course, connected to Odysseus. I think I want to see your faces here, so I'm going to go ahead and just give an outline. I'm not going to go, I'll go into detail at times, but yeah, you can take this one down. Thank you so much. This is Odysseus, but we'll just do the conversation here. And I'm going to give you an outline of the underworld because we want to hear this. The general structure of the underworld, also known as Hades, varies throughout the Greco-Roman era. But nevertheless, there are certain standards that are more or less consistent. At the time of the writing of the Iliad, Hades was known as a damp and moldy place hidden inside the hollows of the earth. According to the Iliad, Hades was literally located beneath the earth as an actual physical location. It says Poseidon from deep under them shuddered all the limitable earth, the sheer heads of the mountains, and all the feet of Ida with her many waters were shaken, and all her crests, and the city of Troy, the ships of the Achaeans, Hades, lord of the dead below, were in terror, and he sprang from his throne and screamed aloud for fear that above him he who circles the land, Poseidon, might break the earth open, and the houses of the dead lie open to men and immortals, ghastly and moldering, so that the very gods shudder before them. Such was the crash that sounded as the gods came driving together in wrath. So in this story, of course, Poseidon he's the earth shaker. He's shaking so many different things that Hades is afraid that the overworld is going to fall into the underworld and all the spirits will be released. Now, the actual location of Hades was a secret. Shh, don't tell anybody. Now, possibly literal dark gates fashioned of iron are mentioned. Some people say it's metaphor. Some say it's actual. These are these great iron gates. Of course, we have this as mentioned in the Iliad. Beaten down by my hands, you will pass through the gates of Hades or Hades. These mighty gates were of iron. It says, and anyone I perceive against the gods, says Zeus, While attempting to go amongst the Trojans and help them, or among the Danaans, he shall be whipped against his dignity back to Olympus, or I shall take him and dash him down to the murk of Tartarus, far below, where the uttermost depth of the pit lies under earth, where there are gates of iron and a brazen doorstone as far beneath the house of Hades as from earth and the sky lies. The gates of Hades, of course, brought fear to the hearts of mortals. So these are the great iron gates. It does kind of remind me a little bit of Tolkien there. The Iliad also mentions both a river in Hades and the infamous hound as well at the gates. Uh, Athena speaks in this context. He says, if in the willingness of my heart I had thought like his, when Heracles went down to Hades of the gates to hail back from the kingdom of the dark, the hound of the grisly death god, death would have got clear of the steep, dripping Stygian waters. The river was located before the gates of Hades, and once the spirits of the dead crossed over this river, they could not return. But as we know from the story concerning the death of Patroclus, the dead who were not properly buried could return to the upper world to communicate with the living, often to demand their proper burial. In fact, Achilles had Patroclus, who is his close friend, appear before him, saying, bury me as quickly as may be. Let me pass through the gates of Hades. The souls, the images of dead men hold me at a distance and will not let me cross the river and mingle amongst them. But I wander as I am by Hades' house of the wide gates, and I call upon you in sorrow. Give me your hand. No longer shall I come back from death once you give me the rights of burning. Now, the river Styx was named after the goddess of the same name. Who is this goddess? Well, Styx is the eldest daughter of Oceanus. She actually took the side of Zeus during the war with the Titans, and she gathered up her children, Nike or Victory, and Zelos, and who is rivalry, and Bias, who is force, and Kratos, who is strength, to fight next to the Olympians. So yeah, so she is a hero, a heroine. As a reward for her faithfulness, Zeus made her stream the power to hold oaths as promised by the gods. So so when one of the gods was to take an oath by Styx, then Iris, so if God is going to take an oath, so when the god takes an oath, then Iris, what she will do is fetch a cup full of water from Styx, and the god, while taking the oath, will pour out this water. So the river Styx is considered the river of oaths, which I find is really interesting because many cultures around the world see this underworld realm as a place where you hold oaths. Even those in sub-Saharan Africa, many of those believe that. Styx, she, as the lady, lived directly by the entrance of the underworld. She actually lived in a lofty grotto that was supported by silver columns. We're getting so, wow. Let's hear about where she lived. Hesiod notes, and there in Hades is housed a goddess loathed even by the immortals, dreaded Styx, eldest daughter of Oceanus, who flows back on himself, and apart from the gods, she lives in her famous palace, which is overroofed with towering rocks, and the whole circuit is undergirded with silver columns, and pushes heaven, and seldom does. Iris, the rainbow, come her way with a message across the sea's wide ridges, those times when dispute and quarreling start amongst the immortals, and some of those who have their home on Olympus is lying, and Zeus sends Iris to carry the many-storied water that the gods may swear their great oaths on. Okay, so you have this idea. Styx was one of the, again, connected to Oceanus, who were, by the way, playing with Persephone in the flowery meadow when she was seized and carried off by the underworld Hades. So there is this palace that is there. Hesiod describes this river as follows. By the way, it is Stygian, is connected with Styx. According to many of these sources, you do have different interpretations, but you also have interpretations that say they're one and the same. I want to make that clear. So there's no, deep orthodoxy or fundamentalism in paganism, right? So Hesiod describes this river as follows. He says that cold water of the river Styx that drizzles down from a steep sky climbing cliffside, and it is the one horn of Oceanus stream, and travels off that holy river a great course through night's blackness under the wide swayed earth, and this water is the 10th part of it. For the 9th loop of silver swirling waters around the earth, the sea's wide ridges, he tumbles into salt water, but this stream, greatly vexing the gods, runs off the precipice, this imperishable, primeval water of Styx, and it jets down through the jagged country, says Hesiod. Plato in his Phaedo also talks about these streams. He also says opposite this fourth river issues, it is said, first into a wild and awful place, which is all of a dark blue color, like lapis lazuli. This is called the Stygian River and the lake which forms it, and it is also the river Styx. And when the river has flowed in here and has received fearful powers into its waters, it passes under the earth and circles around in directions opposed to that of the it's Phrygian in meeting together on the other side. So you do have these sources. Again, that's Plato. We do have also the Odyssey does talk about the underworld. Here we have a general description of how to get to Hades, as referred to by the goddess Circe, providing the first systematic layout of the Greek underworld in Greek literature. Okay, so we have this laid out. And of course, obviously, the way is to go through beneath the north wind, now crosses the stream of Oceanus, where is a level shore and the groves of Persephone. So you got these groves there. These groves are described to have tall poplars and willows that shed their fruit. There do thou beach thy ships by thy deep eddying Oceanus. And so you have there. So there into the Archon flow, and it mentions, of course, the Pharophygian and the Coclis, which is the branches of the water Styx. And there is a rock and the meeting place of the two rivers. And so what is said is that he has to do a particular ritual. Now, the ritual goes as follows. At this rock, where the rivers meet, Odysseus makes the sacrifice to the ghosts. So here, Parmenides and Eurylochus held the victims, while I drew my sharp sword from beside my thigh, and I dug a pit of a cubit's length this way and that, and around it poured a libation to all the dead. First with milk and honey, thereafter with sweet wine, and in the third place with water. And I sprinkled thereon white barley meal, and I earnestly entreated the powerless heads of the dead, vowing that when I came to Ithaca, I would sacrifice in my halls a barren heifer, the best I had, and pile the altar with goodly gifts, and to Tiresias alone would sacrifice separately a ram, wholly black, the goodliest of my flock. But when with vows and prayers I made supplication to the tribes of the dead, I took the sheep and cut their throats over the pit, and the dark blood ran forth. Then there gathered from out of Erebus the spirits of those who are dead, brides and unwedded youths, and toil-worn old men, and tender maidens, with hearts yet new to sorrow, and many too that had been wounded with bronze-tipped spears, men slain in fight, wearing their blood-stained armor. There came thronging crowds about the pit from every side, with a wondrous cry, and pale fear seized me. So, of course, he says also, he says, then I called to my comrades and bade them fly and burn the sheep that lay there slain with the pitiless bronze, and to make prayer to the gods, to mighty Hades and to dread Persephone. And I myself drew my sword from beside my thigh and sat there, and would not suffer the powerless heads of the dead to draw near to the blood until I inquired of Tiresias. And so you have the story of the dead coming forth. It is a fascinating story. Well, of course, we don't have time to go through all this, but yeah. So there's this pageantry of different kinds of forms. Even Agamemnon appeared, and obviously Tiresias. But that's, of course, something for another story, right? Also, I want to bring up a few other things. I do want to close up a little bit. Yeah. In the Greco-Roman era, one did not necessarily have to go all the way to the stream of Oceanus to reach the underworld. For one way was believed by going through the Necromontion of Hades and Epirus. Located on the banks of the Acheron River in Epirus, near the ancient city of Ephyra, the site known as the Necromontion or Necromention was devoted to the chthonic deities Hades and Persephone. The name actually means oracle of death. The ancient Greeks actually believed this place was where one could enter into the underworld. For here, the Acheron River met the other two rivers, and from there was believed to flow into Hades itself. Some have interpreted the names of these rivers in different ways. Acheron can mean joyless, for example. According to the Odyssey, it was here. Yeah, according to the Odyssey, it was here that Odysseus asked his questions of the dead, making a special rite where the ghosts were called upon. For Odysseus, this meant the sacrifice of a ram and ewe, as well as others. Of course, as a result of that, people would make a pilgrimage here to this site. Those who wished to receive an oracle gathered by the ziggurat-shaped temple and had a sacred meal. The food was a strange assortment of dishes with everything from barley bread and broad beans to pork and oysters. Most agree some kind of narcotic substance was added to the mix. The pilgrim then went through a purification ritual, inclusive of prayer, and then sacrificed a sheep. After these preparations, the seeker descended down various meandering corridors, leaving offerings as they reached each of the iron gates on the descent. They eventually reached 3 doors of the dark labyrinth, leading to the central room where the spirits of the dead were believed to have awaited. Here, what will happen is pilgrims were asked a series of questions and then were led chanting various prayers. Suddenly, the priest would rise from the floor and appear to fly about the temple, probably using theatrical cranes. Here in this central chamber is the remnant of an enormous cauldron surrounded by a balustrade. Throughout history, metal bowls and cauldrons with highly polished inside surfaces were filled with water and used as speculums for mere gazing. So I find this, so we have here images of that. You can take down the image. I think it's fascinating. Now, we have more about the story of the journey of the ghosts of the suitors of Hades. So we have a little more of a story, and I do want to go here. This is interesting. What happens is, meanwhile, Hermes called forth the spirits of the wooers. These are those who are trying to woo Penelope, the wife of Odysseus, trying to, and so as you know, Odysseus and his son slay them all, so they're heading for the underworld. And Hermes, he held in his hand a wand, a fair wand of gold, wherewith he lulls to sleep the eyes of whom he will, while others again he wakens even out of slumber. With this he roused and led the spirits, and they followed gibbering. And as in the innermost recesses of a wondrous cave, bats flit about gibbering, when one has fallen from off the rock, from the chain in which they cling to one another, so these went with him gibbering. And Hermes, the helper, led them down the dank ways. Past the streams of Oceanus they went, past the rock Lucus, past the gates of the sun and the land of dreams, and quickly came to the mean of Asphalto, where the spirits dwell, phantoms of men who have done with toils. Now I'll go, wait, we're seeing here something really important. We learn a lot from this passageway. In this passage, we learn more about the topography of Hades. For following the streams of Oceanus, at the perimeter of the earth, there stands this rock, Lucus, or Lucus the White. After this rock, there is the gate of the sun, where this orb of light descends its location. Remember we talked about the sun has to go into the underworld? Well, this is where it goes in the underworld. The place after the passageway for the sun to enter the underworld is called the land of dreams. The land of dreams happens to be the final land before the land of death. So you enter dreams first and then death. For then one comes across the mead of Asphalte. So what does this mean? What about that white rock? What is going on with this rock? Well, it turns out, actually, before we go there, let's talk about the District of Dreams. The District of Dreams. There is this concept that dreams are like a community that are actually situated or located at the gates of Hades themselves. And so what will happen is it'll become proverbial to say things like, after a person dies, the spirit flies off, quote, like a dream. Hermes, who obviously conducts these suitors, is also known as the conductor of dreams. We see this in the hymn of Hermes, and he does lead him through. Since Hermes conducts dreams as well as the ghosts of the dead, dreams, in a sense, move like ghosts. It is not surprising then that dreams have gates too. So we do have a district of dreams, and this is connected or close to this rock, this white rock, Lucus, and which is connected or close to this district. What is this white rock, this Lucus, right? So we take a look at this word, and Lucus is of course is a white rock, and Lucus is also connected to an actual place. So let's go to the next image. There we go. So Lucus is an actual place where there happens to be these white rocks. These white rocks you see, this is a sheer cliff. Obviously, this is in the Aegean, right? And so what happens here? Here we go. So what happens is that you have stories connected to this white rock. Since the picture is so small, we'll just keep going on. Thank you for showing that. So this white rock is a place where, according to many stories, is connected to a place called Cape Lucas. Today, Lucas is known as Lefkada. It is located in the Ionian Sea. Not the Aegean, but the Ionian Sea, excuse me. From this rock, Sappho is supposed to have jumped into the sea after Phaon, who's somebody that she loved. Strabo goes on to describe a shrine of Apollo Lucatus situated on the cape. Um, and then, of course, there was even an ancestral cult connected to the site. In fact, Strabo says that every year, some criminal was cast down from the white rock into the sea below for the sake of averting evil. Wings and even birds would be fastened to these victims, and men in fishing boats would be stationed below the rock in order to retrieve the victim after his plunge. So you have this idea. We also know Menander chose for his play a setting that was known for its exotic cult practices, also involving a white rock, and conflating it with the one that's connected to the underworld. And what's interesting is that there's a reference here. It says, one more time, taking off in the air, down from the white rock into the dark waves do I dive, intoxicated with lust. There's another one from Euripides. It says, I would be crazy not to give all the herds of the Cyclopes in return for drinking one cup of that wine and throw myself from the white rock into the brine. Once I am intoxicated with eyebrows relaxed, whoever is not happy when he drinks is crazy. In both instances, falling from the white rock is parallel to falling into a swoon, to be basically being intoxicated, to being in love, right? And so you have this idea that you're jumping off, and of course, Sappho jumps off because she's in love, right? She is falling into love, and love in many ways is looked at or viewed at as death, right? But on top of all that, there is another story, another one yet, and it's not Sappho, but this story is connected to Aphrodite. So there's another story of the swooning for the love of Aphrodite and the jump into death. And so what is going on here is we're seeing that this rock in the sacred topography, which is connected to dreams, is also connected to the idea of love, right? Right. Aphrodite is death and Persephone is life. That is correct, Allie. Exactly it. So you have this idea that is there. And so that little white rock down in Hades is reflecting these deeper ideas. Also, of course, I do have to wrap it up, but I do want to mention that there is also a other places. Hesiod describes how the Titans were defeated by the gods and chained to the pit of Tartarus. And of course, what happened is that there is this wall around Tartarus. Round it runs a fence of bronze, and night spreads in triple line all above it like a neck circlet, while above grow the roots of the earth and unfruitful sea. So you have these triple rocks. And it says Poseidon fixed gates of bronze upon it, and a wall runs all around it on every side. So you have this. So you have this kind of story as well. So we have the idea of the underworld. Now, I want to bring up the Orphic Mysteries. The Orphic Mysteries have another idea of this underworld that is a little bit more positive. I think we can go to the next image. I'm hoping it's what I'm thinking it is. It is. Now, the Orphic Mysteries describes its own version of the appearance of Hades. As the soul descends, many of the tablets, there are golden tablets, you're seeing one right here, instructs the soul to keep clear of the first spring that they encounter. Most scholars agree that the first spring is a spring known as Lethe, the waters of forgetfulness, which one is to drink to forget their previous life so that they may be able to reincarnate again. To pass this first spring then means to bypass reincarnation and to seek eternal life without rebirth. So passing the first spring, the soul is to continue on to the spring or the lake of memory. So these tablets are buried with those who connect to the Orphic Mysteries to remind them, I guess, when you're dead, you wake up and you read these, and this is a guide for us in the underworld to how to avoid this spring of forgetfulness and arrive at the spring or the lake of memory. This lake of memory is located on the right side of Hades, although one tablet from Aletheia that tells that the soul is the head to the one on the left, but most of it is on the right-hand side. The variation, of course, connects to the eclectic nature, obviously, of the Orphic Mysteries. And so I'm going to read one of the Akaki tablet for the 2nd century BCE, or first reads as it talks about a cypress tree accompanies this final spring that says, "I am parched with thirst and I perish, but give me to drink of the ever-flowing spring on the right with the cypress. Who are you? Where do you come from? I am a son of earth and of starry heaven." With the question asked, the new deceased now knows the identity, that they're both earth and heaven. A more detailed description of the underworld arises from the Hipponian tablet, which was discovered in 1969, and it runs as follows. "This grave belongs to memory for the time when he shall die. On the right side of the well-fitted house of Hades is a spring, and close to this stands a shining cypress. Around this place, the descending souls cool themselves. Do not approach this spring, but proceed to the lake of memory, with cold water flowing forth. There are guardians here, and they will ask you with a shrewd speech, 'What are you looking for in the darkness of deadly Hades?' Say as follows: 'I am a son of earth and starry heaven. I am parched with thirst and perishing, but give me to drink from the cold water from memory's lake.' And they will show you to the chthonic king and give you to drink from memory's lake. And then, having drunk, you will walk on the holy path of the many, on which also others renowned Mysticae and Bacchae walk. As emphasized here, the individual soul must at all costs remember their individual identity as both as son of earth and starry heaven, and so avoid the first spring is vital for accomplishing this purpose." So there, so you have other myths, Orphic myth, one dedicated to memory, says, "To memory, fumigation of frankincense, the consort I evoke of Zeus divine, source of the holy, sweetly speaking, muses." Talks about her incense, her sweetness of waters, right there, right? Also, of course, I won't go into this. There's even, but I will mention that Pausanias talks about a piece of artwork that goes into detail of the underworld, but I don't have time to go through that. Let's I guess we can take down this image. So thank you so much. Okay. So what happens now? Let's go here. I gotta kind of skip sections here, but I gotta go through all these pages. I have 60 pages. You guys realize that? Okay. Another account of the underworld, almost done though. We're through all 60 pages. So now what happens is that you have the story of Plato's view of the afterlife. So what I'm going to do is I want to talk about Plato's view of the afterlife. I'll go a little bit the Aeneid, and then I'm going to close up. Okay. The most famous story regarding the afterlife is, of course, Plato's view regarding in his book 10 of the Republic, although some of it is understood as figurative rather than literal. The story begins with a certain dying in battle. Following the collecting of the corpses from the battlefield 10 days later, they discover Ur's undecomposed body. A couple of days later, revives while on his own funeral pyre, and he begins to tell the tale of where he had been while apparently deceased. Traveling with others recently deceased souls, encounters a strange metaphysical crossroads with 4 openings, 2 proceeding into and out of the sky, and 2 proceeding into and out of the earth. Besides these mystical portals were judges who were instructing the souls which direction they were meant to follow. Those considered righteous by the judges were told to proceed to the way leading to the sky, while those who were wicked were told to follow the path leading to the underworld. Yet was made an exception by the judges and is given the mission to simply report what he sees to those who are from the land of the living. As he was given his instructions, noticed that while some souls were going up on one of the sky portals, other souls were going down through the other ones. These souls from the latter opening in the sky arrived spotless and pure, telling all about the beautiful places they've seen and how wonderful they felt. Meanwhile, in like harmony, one portal of the earth received souls, while the others released them. Those that returned from below appeared filthy and worn out and exhausted, weeping in utter and complete despair, while all along telling about the horrors they had witnessed and were party to. In fact, each soul was required to pay a tenfold penalty for all the wicked deeds committed while alive. Yet those emerged were the lucky ones, for many were not permitted to even leave this underworld nightmare, especially those who were killers and tyrants. After a little stay in the meadow of the souls, was instructed to continue his underworld journey and eventually reached the place where he and the accompanying souls could observe a rainbow shaft of light brighter than any they had seen before. This prism of spectacular radiance was known as the spindle of necessity, where Lady Necessity, her daughters, and many sirens occupied. They organized these souls into rows and were each one handed a lottery token except for Next, each soul was ordained to come before the ladies and choose their next life. Recalled the first to choose a new soul, a man who had not experienced the terrors of the world below, but who had received his rewards in the world above. Unfortunately, he decided to seek power, a place in the next life, choosing an authoritative dictatorship. Suddenly, a dark realization thrust its weights upon his soul when he realized, to his sudden horror, that he was doomed to commit terrible crimes in his next life, even to eat his own children. According to he beat his breasts, blaming God, the stars, and everything except himself. In this case, he had been virtuous in a previous life, yet his virtue had been merely customary without foundation upon consciously realizing the principle. Noticed that those who had arrived via the path in the sky chose darker fates for their next life, while the ones who arrived via the path from the earth chose better lives. Most selected lives quite different from the previous lives. Just happened to accompany the soul of Odysseus. He declared, I observed how Odysseus reflected upon the hollowness and uncertainty of fame, the battering of endless journeys, and the treacherous adventures. Also, another instance, Orpheus recalled how he had been murdered by a woman in his previous life. As a consequence, Orpheus' hatred of women influenced his decision to be reborn as a swan rather than entering a woman's womb. So there's a lot of flexibility. You can even become an animal. Following this selection process, each individual soul was assigned a deity to help them throughout their life. Passing the throne of Lady Necessity, the souls and were continued onto the plane of oblivion, where the rivers of forgetfulness or lathe flowed. Each soul was then required to drink of the water in various quantities except for As they drank, each soul immediately forgot everything. As they laid down at night to sleep, each soul was lifted up into the air in various directions for rebirth, completing their journey. According to this entire journey of the soul from this one life to the incarnation in the next lasted 1,000 years. Again, according to the entire journey of the soul from this one life to incarnation into the next lasts for 1,000 years. So you have these ideas. Finally, of course, last but certainly not least, we go into the afterlife that's understood by Virgil's Aeneid by the Romans. And this is the classical one. This will be the last stop that we go on our journey into the underworld. The Roman view of life after death were captured in Virgil's view of Hades, as portrayed in his epic work known as the Aeneid. Aeneas wants to get to the underworld to see his father, but to do so, he must cross the river Styx, which separates the mortal realm from the land of the dead. Charon, who is the ferryman, ferries passengers from the earthly side to Hades' realm, but only if they have been properly buried. Because of his experience with other mortals, Charon doesn't really like to carry over living passengers who might steal from Pluto and Persephone. Besides the thieving mortals, he had regrettably ferried across Jupiter's children, while Aeneas is not. On this score, the Sibyl can obviously assuages Charon's doubts. So what happens is they cross to the other side of the river. And Cerberus, the snaky three-headed watchdog, is there. He poses very little danger since the Sibyl has brought 3 tranquilizer-soaked doggy treats. From him, they go past the dead infants and the innocents. So the realm of the infants. So basically, if you are a baby, so if you die in childbirth, you go to the realm of the innocents. And there, you're only there for a short period of time, and you're immediately reborn in another body. So the ancient Roman question of what happens to babies if they die in childbirth is they're just immediately reincarnated later on. But it's also the realm of the innocent. So those individuals who are found guilty of crimes they did not commit and are condemned as a result go to this realm of the innocents, in which case they are also immediately reborn in a better life, in a good life. So when people say, "Hey, that innocent person turned out was executed," what happens now? And the good news is that they are reborn in a better state. So then what happens is the next level down. So what happens is that now he goes to the realm of the suicides. who now regret their choices. These are unhappy lovers, including Aeneas's own Queen Dido, who he didn't even know that the Queen of Carthage had killed herself. But there it is, and she kind of quickly turns away. After he sheds a few tears, he goes down to the next level. This is the shades. These are the warriors, who is nothing left more than their names. And then they go further down, and here there is a choice. On one side, you have Tartarus. On the other side is the Elysian fields. The left-hand side is Tartarus. Aeneas hears the groans of ghosts, the sounds of lashes, and the dragging of chains in this realm of unrelenting fate. There's a fury there. It's twice as deep as the earth is distant from the skies. I mean, it is a pit, and the Titans are here. Sibyls began to list the punishment and crimes of those condemned to be here. But they include incest, adultery, accepting bribes, defrauding of inheritance, and desertion of duty. Between Tartarus on the left and the Elysian fields on the right is the middle. Here you have the walls of Pluto's palace, where Aeneas affixes the golden bow. And of course, a ritual is performed. And then the pair, of course, proceeds to Elysium, where they find spirits engaged in pleasures like tending to horses and chariots and wrestling and singing. This is the home of the good people, the patriots, the poets, the priests. It's a happy place. And of course, here he runs into Acasus, his father. He runs into his mother. It is like paradise. It still is the underworld, but it's a happy place. So you do have this underworld. You have Tartarus on the left side, the Elysian realm onto the right, and in the middle, you have where Persephone and Hades have their throne, as well as the three judges. Now, that's not it. But what happens in the end, this is where I'm going to close up, is as follows, is that after 1,000 years, those in Tartarus and those in Elysium are released. They're all released, and they all drink from the waters of Lethe, the waters of forgetfulness. Now, what's interesting here is if you're in Elysium, it's 1,000 happy years. If you're in Tartarus, this is a terrible place of fire, of drowning, of torture. However, you are being purged of your evil in Tartarus. This is understood as purgatoria. You're being purged. That's where you get the word purgatory from. And so what happens if you're just a little bad? You're not there for the full 1,000 years. What happens is if you're a little bad, you did a few bad things, you're there for 100, 200, 300 years, and you transfer over to the Elysium fields. So you do this transfer over. But those who are really bad, you're there for the full 1,000 years. Now, I'm going to quote right from the Aeneid. Here it goes. So it goes as follows. It's nor death itself can wholly wash their stains. This is speaking of Tartarus, but long contracted filth ever in the soul remains. The relics of vice they wear, and spots of sin obscene in every face appear. For this are various penances enjoined, and some are hung to bleach upon the wind, some are plunged in waters, others purged in fires, till all the dregs are drained and all the rust expires. All have their manes, and those manes bear the few so cleansed to those abodes repair, and breathe in ample fields the soft Elysian air. Then are they happy when by a length of time the scurf is worn away for each committed crime. No speck is left of their habitual stains, but the pure ether of the soul remains. But when 1,000 rolling years are past, so long their punishments and penances last, while droves of minds are, by the driving God, compelled to drink the deep Lethean flood, in large forgetful droughts, to stoop their cares of their past labors and their irksome years, that unremembering of its former pain, the soul may suffer mortal flesh again. And there you have it. So, as the last step in purification, the soul must drink from the rivers of forgetfulness of Lethe. They may then begin a new life. Anchises, the father of Aeneas, points to the souls by the river of oblivion who will become the illustrious leaders of Rome and descendants of Aeneas if only he fulfills his duty. In fact, he says, now fix your sight and stand intent to see your Roman race and your Julian progeny. The mighty Caesar waits his vital hour, impatient for the world, and grasps his promised power. But next behold the youth of form divine, Caesar himself exalted in his line, Augustus promised oft and long foretold, sent to the realm that Saturn ruled of old, born to restore a better age of gold. And so there you have it. There is the closing. There is the end. Happily ever after is possible, because even though you have this idea of drinking from the waters of Lethe and returning to life again after this 1,000 years of either good things or bad things, if you have the Orphic mysteries and you believe in that, there's a way to avoid that the spring of Lethe and drink from the water of memory, and therefore you're out from the coils of reincarnation, and you are free absolutely from this earthly realm and entering the realm of the spirit. So there you have it. We've covered quite a bit. I do want to say that this has been a very long but even exhausting a kind of conversation here, going in depth into not only the deity by the name of Hades, but going into his realm. There is so much more, but I have to close up now. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great night. And and avoid the spring of Lethe next time. Okay, so go to the lake of memory, okay, by the cypress tree, and it's on the right hand side. Don't listen to that left hand side idea.